Join me today as I dig into my own visibility planning for 2020. In this episode, I'm going to share my wins and failures, yes, for 2019, that pitching sprint that sometimes looked like more of a marathon than a sprint, as well as some pretty solid goals that I have for the new year and how visibility is going to play a part in accomplishing them. My hope is that by giving you an inside peek into my plan, you'll be better able to come up with your own. All right, let's do it. Hey there, pitches. Welcome to the Go Pitch Yourself podcast with me, Angie Trueblood, a self proclaimed podcast junkie. I'm on a mission to rid the world of the crappy pitches that are filling up inboxes everywhere. Want to help? Then let's get pitching. Hey there, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Go Pitch Yourself podcast. I am super pumped to have you here with me today. Now, you probably know by now that I am a lover and an advocate for all things podcasting. And so I wanted to take a second to share with you some of my favorite episodes from the past couple of weeks that I hope that you find both helpful and timely as we start looking to a new year, maybe goal setting and those types of things. So, one episode came out recently, and it was one that I was actually featured on. So, Carol Cox, a friend of mine, has a podcast called Speaking Your Brand. And in episode 150, she invited me on to talk about pitching and guesting on podcasts, but it was all with a nod to gearing up for more speaking opportunities. So her audience is filled with typically entrepreneurs who are looking to leverage speaking as a way to grow their own audience and their own business. And you and I both know that podcast guesting is a great first step in building that speaking platform. So she and I dug deep into that, and I think you'll really enjoy the podcast episode. And funny enough, she and I met when I actually pitched a client of mine to her. So it's also a really great example of how to build relationships in business and how when you do good work, people notice that and you can create friends, business referrals, all sorts of great stuff can come from it. So check out Carol Cox's Speaking Your Brand podcast, episode 150, and we'll definitely link to these in the show notes. Second podcast I would love for you to check out is one that my client, Nikki Roush, who has also been a guest on this podcast, she was a guest on Elizabeth Hartkey's Scaling Up podcast. And I love it because Nikki talked with her about closing the sale, which is a specialty of Nikki's. But I think this episode could be really helpful as we look to our goals in the new year. Maybe we're looking to close out some business now. So maybe some of us, I know I sure do, have discovery calls with folks who are looking to hire me in the new year. And I think a refresher on closing sales could be beneficial for all of us. Now, if your business is seasonal, you may actually experience more activity of people coming to you and being interested in working with you in January. So, honing in on those sale closing skills could be really beneficial now. So, definitely check that out. It's Elizabeth Hartkey's Scaling Up podcast, and it's episode 53 with Nikki. Then we have one, this was a little bit ago, Michaela Quinn. She has a podcast called Live Free, and I love it. She speaks to upcoming service providers. So, folks who will traditionally start their business in the VA space, in the virtual assistant space, but she has a number of programs that help them as they scale and grow those businesses. And her podcast speaks directly to that audience. Well, my other client, Danielle Hayden from Kickstart Accounting, and also she's the author of the Profit Planner series of books, which is amazing. She and Michaela had a chat on episode 82 that talked all about the financial numbers that should drive your decision making in business. And I think a lot of times we might get into our business and it starts to grow organically. And we may not have all of our systems in place as that business starts to grow. And then, if we're not careful, what happens is we wake up one day and some of our back end systems and processes can be all sorts of out of whack. So, I would love for you to listen to Danielle's interview on Michaela's podcast because they really talk about some of the basics of financial bookkeeping and accounting, but also how to use those numbers to make really smart decisions as you grow. That is something perfect for you to be listening to now as we look towards the new year. And we are laying out, I know for me, I'm laying out Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 goals and where I want to invest my money and my time. So definitely check that out. And lastly, I'm telling you, I love podcasts, right? Maybe I'll do a whole episode on the podcasts that I love. That could be kind of fun. So, my last one that I wanted to recommend is my girls, Beth and Sarah, over at Pantsuit Politics. This has been a mainstay in my podcast player for years now. These women run this incredible podcast that definitely tackles politics head on. And I think we all in this day and age need to be really aware of what is going on around us and the role that we play both in our community, in our state, and in our federal lives. And they have a podcast, and the tagline, which is so descriptive of who they are at the core of them. It's the home of grace filled political conversations. And so they really tackle current events and what's happening in our country and beyond with such grace, with such respect, and with such a yearning for us to come together and have conversations, even when we might disagree. So, it's not necessarily business related, but I love them. And they just had a podcast go live called The Constant Dilemma That is Amazon. And for me, it was really fitting because we were out of town a couple of weeks ago when we went to an independent bookstore. And I bought this little booklet basically called How to Resist Amazon. It was just such an eye opening read for me, things I had never thought about before. And it just challenged me to think a little bit differently about some things that I had never really consciously thought about at all. So I think you guys really might enjoy that conversation. And you can pop over to that and listen to that on their show, Pantsuit Politics. Okay, I've rambled on and on enough about podcasts because I love them. Now we're going to dig into today's content. So I'm super excited. I know a lot of shows and a lot of folks are talking about goals for the new year. And I think that's really important. So, at a high level, it's really important to know what you want to accomplish in your business in 2020. And where this episode takes a little bit of a different twist is okay, well, once I know what my goals are, how is my visibility? How is the visibility part of my business going to support me in accomplishing those goals? So, it gets down into the minutia of not just what my goals are, but what are the action steps that are going to help me accomplish them. So I'm hot off something called the CEO Retreat with Rachel Cook, who is my business coach. I joined her year long accelerator program several months ago, and it has just been a game changer in terms of how I look at my business, how I make decisions in my business, and definitely how I goal set and plan. And so I'm coming off of a weekend, both Friday, we had the CEO retreat, which is all about planning out your goals for the next year. And then we had 2 days with my mastermind. So it was hot seats on Saturday. And then on Sunday, it was a dig in and implement day, which I love. So I was really able to do a little bit of the prep work before I got together with some of the other ladies from the CEO retreat. And I looked back at 2019, what my business had accomplished, what went well, what didn't. And I thought it could be really helpful for me to share those things candidly with you all and what my goals are looking towards 2020 and my plans for accomplishing those goals, right? So for me, oftentimes my primary business outcome, the one really at the top of the pile, to be honest, is revenue. How much money am I looking to make so that I have this business. I love it. I love the clients that I serve. I love the work that I do. And at the end of the day, it is a way for me to support my family and living a lifestyle that I am proud to offer my kiddos. Right. And so I need to know how much money I am bringing back to my family so that we can use it in a variety of ways. And so typically, my goal for the new year is going to be some sort of revenue goal. And that's no different this year. So as I look to 2020, I have in my head a revenue goal. Well, I need to look back at the things that I'm offering in my business and evaluate which ones worked and which ones didn't. And the two offerings that I have now and that I expect to have throughout the year coming up is my one-to-one client work and then the coursework. So I recently had the early enrollment launch of the Go Pitch Yourself program. It will be opened for a tiny little bit again in January before it starts on January 13th. So if you are interested in being involved in a program that teaches you how to pitch yourself for podcasts and how to be a guest on podcasts, definitely go to my website. The best way to make sure you're notified of it is to snag the roadmap for podcast pitching success. So that's angietrueblood.com/roadmap. And then you will be notified when it opens back up for that tiny little enrollment period in early January. So, those are the two pieces that I looked back on for 2019 to kind of evaluate what worked and what didn't. And so, for one to one work, I definitely grew towards the end of the year. And I actually went client by client and wrote down how I found them. So, how did they come into my life? And repeatedly, there was a consistent pattern of there were a few folks who I met at conferences. So, in real life, we met and connected and also referrals. So, referrals are a huge part of my one to one client work. People work with me, they love it, and then they tell their friends as they're talking about increasing visibility and getting on podcasts. The folks that have worked with me will often refer me to their colleagues. So, that is definitely what worked for that in 2019. And so that's something I can definitely replicate as I move into the new year. Now, the new piece of my business in 2019 was the launching of the Go Pitch Yourself program. And I just did that during basically a flash sale over Black Friday, Small Business Saturday. Oh my gosh, what are they? Cyber Monday. And then that was it. That's when it closed. So I did a really short early enrollment sale on the Go Pitch Yourself program. And I didn't quite know what to expect when I launched it. I set goals of good, better, best. So 10 folks, I would be really excited. I would be like, okay, that's my goal. I hit it. Awesome. 15 would be my better goal. And then 20 would be my best. Now, I knew that in the online space, you always hear that email is king, right? Like your email list is what actually converts some of these more passive, which is hilarious. It's not passive, but what ends up converting some of these more passive products. Well, my email list was kind of small. It was 200, but I did end up converting better than my initial goal of 10. And so for me, I was able to look back and see, okay, well, every person that enrolled in Go Pitch Yourself, I thought, because I've also been hearing lately that Facebook groups don't convert. The folks that are hanging out in Facebook groups are often not the same people that are going to buy your products. And so in my head, I kind of thought that. But when I actually listed on paper, everyone that enrolled in that small round, that small enrollment period, I noticed that every single one of them was a member of my Facebook group and was also on my email list. And I have both of them highly optimized to drive people to the other. So if you come into my Facebook group, you are encouraged to join my email list. If you join my email list, you are encouraged to go join my Facebook group. And so to see that that is where the people that joined the program came from, it allowed me to know that, okay, that is a place that I need to spend time growing my email list and growing my Facebook group. But as I look back at 2019, I actually had a bigger goal in terms of email list growth. And I think I just shared currently it's right around the 200 mark. And my goal was to have it closer to 500 at the point at which I was going to launch the program the first time. So I definitely fell short on that. Part of it was because I was tasked with a job of having a podcast pitching sprint myself. So I was supposed to be pitching myself for podcasts. the goal for me to pitch was 30. And we were anticipating that if I pitched 30, I would probably, just based on relationships and my ability to pitch pretty well, that is what I do, that I would get about a 50% conversion. Well, I ended up getting on nine, primarily because I did not pitch 30. And so I fell short of my goal. When I look back at that podcast pitching sprint, I never really absorbed myself as a client of my own. So the dedication and the consistency with which we book and schedule and pitch the people that are paying us was far greater than what I was doing for my own visibility needs. I think it's that saying again, like the cobbler's kids have the worst shoes or something like that. And that definitely was the case here. I never really hired myself basically to go pitch me. And so that is something that I know needs to change in 2020. So let's look then at my 2020 goals. Well, my big goals are to basically book out my one to one client work every single month of the year. And so for me, that's anywhere between 5 to 6 of those concierge level. We pitch you, we schedule you, we come up with your messaging, all of that. 5 to 6 of those per month. Well, then I have some even bigger goals with the Go Pitch Yourself program compared to this initial early enrollment. And I know in order to do that, I need to build my email list and I need to grow that group, right? So every time that I enroll this program, every time I open it for enrollment, which is going to be tiny enrollment in January, so another short little launch period in early January before the program officially starts. We're going to launch it in April for a May start, and then I'm going to launch it in August for a September start. But my enrollment goals are increasing every single time. So almost every time I enroll, my goal is to increase enrollment by 2/3, which is not a small goal, but you know, go for it, right? Like live with big goals is what I think we should all be doing. So, in order to do that, I have got to increase my email list because I need new people on my list. The same list of 200, I'm probably not going to get the same type of conversion with the people that are on my list. So, I need to keep growing it so that I have a fresh number of folks to be able to share this program with every time it goes live. And so, primarily knowing that, what do I need to do? I literally need to hire myself and become that client number 6. So in January, I have most likely I'm going to be at capacity with 6 clients, but I need to be client number 7. So I need to involve my assistant and make sure that my podcast pitching on behalf of myself is just as important and we use it as just as much of a priority as we do our clients. And so that's, I think, the biggest goal that I have in 2020 is to really consistently be pitching myself for podcast interviews. The one to one client work, I'm dialing back actually on conference attendance in Q1 because I really want to get my own visibility plate spinning. And I'm going to dig deep into the referral space. So I'm going to make sure that the clients that I have and love, that I'm really connecting with them and asking for referrals and asking for them to let folks in their network know that I am open for business to pitch on their behalf. But it really is the Go Pitch Yourself program that has me focusing some of my newer visibility energy on, which would be me consistently pitching for podcast interviews. Okay, so I know that's the how. I'm going to hire myself. Maybe I should invoice myself as well. How many? So that's always what people want to know. Angie, how many podcasts should I be pitching to per week or per month? And really, it's hard to know that because you don't know which shows are going to bring in a particular number of subscribers or group members or podcast listeners. But my plan is to use the information that I use for clients to establish a rough idea of audience size. And because of that, I'm going to want to pitch to both large audiences. So I'm going to have some stretch goals that I pitch myself to. So some podcasts that are significantly larger than my own. And then I'm also going to pitch to some that are on par with my audience size, because you always want a variety of pitches to be out, because you just don't know what the conversion is going to be. And most likely, if you're pitching podcasts that have audiences that are roughly the same size as yours, you're going to get a pretty good acceptance rate, as long as you're pitching shows that are relevant and you're pitching them with a really solid message. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pitch a variety of podcast sizes. And I'm also not just going to rely on relationships. One of the easiest ways I was able to get those 9 podcast interviews was by reaching out to folks that I already had relationships with. But I know, in order for me to grow into new audiences and sort of capitalize and bring those folks back to me, I need to be pitching to audiences that have never heard of me. I need to be growing my audience of new folks and bringing them back to me so that we can kind of get to know each other, right? Okay, so then what are we really going to be able to handle, my team and I? I mean, I think that's the question, right? If I could, we would pitch myself to 5 podcasts a week. But just the scope of the work that we already are doing, that's a bit unrealistic. And I don't want to set a goal that's so far of a stretch goal that we don't ever come close to accomplishing it. So we are going to start with pitching me to 2 podcasts per week, but we are going to be consistent with this. So that's the plan right now, is to pitch me for 2 podcasts a week. And we'll do a good mix of warm and cold podcast hosts, ones that know me, ones that don't, and a nice mix of audience size as well. But then the question becomes, okay, well, how are we going to pull this through? So at the end of podcast interviews, typically the host will ask, how can my audience connect with you? Often you're given the opportunity to offer that audience a free resource in exchange for their email. And so for me, knowing that my group is a great converter into my program, and knowing that my email is a great converter into my program, that is going to be my call to action. So, hey, Angie, tell me how folks can connect with you after this interview. Sure. Thank you for asking. Well, obviously, you guys can hop on over and subscribe to the Go Pitch Yourself podcast. But if you are looking for a little bit more support, you can go to my website, angietrueblood.com/roadmap, and download my free roadmap for podcast pitching success. And you're welcome to join my community, the Go Pitch Yourself Facebook group, where we've got lots of folks in there who are in the same boat and are looking to grow their business and their visibility. So that would just be my little shtick at the end of a podcast, right? Easy peasy. And doing all of this, you may think, gosh, it's so in the weeds and being very specific about what you're doing. But if we're not specific about our goals and we don't know what they're tied to, if we don't know ultimately what these actions, why we're doing them, then when ish hits the fan and February or March and we're super busy, it's really easy for us to kind of poo poo these goals and not do them any longer. So I like to know that I'm being very specific with the actions that I'm going to take, all the way through to my call to action. And knowing specifically what I'm asking people to do reinforces in my head, oh, wait, the reason I want to get on these shows is so that they can join my email list and my group, because those convert really well for me. So it just reinforces in my mind why I'm doing it. Okay, finally, there's this podcast that I do, right? You're actually listening to it right now, the Go Pitch Yourself podcast. And when I originally launched it, I thought I'm going to do episodes every other week initially. Well, when I first launched it, I said I was going to do 2 a week. And some of the ladies in my mastermind then were like, girl, you're crazy. That's too much to bite off at the very beginning. And they were so right. And so doing an episode every other week has been really easy for me to be consistent at, which I think is super important in the podcasting space. But as I look to 2020, in the back of my mind, I always thought I want to go to every week episodes. And this weekend, when I was with my coach, Rachel Cook again, and my mastermind girls, we really dug into why I wanted to do that. And it was because I do have some really great ideas for guests and topics that I would love to share. And quite frankly, I love podcasting. It's super fun for me. And I feel like it's a great medium for me to be able to get my content out. But the truth of the matter is, when you look at visibility, really, there's a couple of different types of marketing, right? And this is straight out of Rachel Cook's playbook for marketing and how to plan your best year ever, which we'll definitely link to in the show notes. I would love for you guys to check that out. But there's this idea of attract marketing, which me pitching myself for podcast interviews and appearing in front of someone else's audience, that is a clear example of an attract method of marketing. I am finding new people and bringing them back to me. Now, my own podcast is more of a nurture form of marketing. So once people have found me, then they can start listening to my podcast and they get a real sense of who I am, if I know what the heck I'm talking about, and if I'm someone that they might feel like they mesh well or that they might want to listen to every other week. Yes, people will find me from searching in Apple Podcasts and all of the different podcast players. But for the most part, I view my podcast as a way for me to shorten that know, like, and trust factor between people that find me and then will eventually come into my community, whether it's through email or my group. And so I'm dialing back the idea of going to every week episodes until I have this podcast pitching piece of my business down pat to where I have a consistent attract strategy that we are executing week on week and that ends up working. So that's the plan for 2020. It's really to focus on me pitching myself. And then after Q1, I'm going to look back. And if I want to increase the number of episodes I release, which I know I will, I'll evaluate if that's something I can actually handle, and I can also determine if it was worth it. So I can get a sense of how many people are listening. Are the downloads increasing? Is the engagement that I'm seeing around the podcast increasing? And if so, it might make sense at that point to increase the number of episodes that I release. So, to recap, my actual visibility plan for the new year is, first of all, for my one to one client work, I am focused on delivering exceptional client results and to also ask for referrals. So, to really lean in on the relationships that I have created with my clients, the trust that I have created, and ask them to connect me with folks that could be a good fit. When I'm at the end of that podcast interview, not only am I going to ask people to, or not only am I going to share with them that they can get access to that roadmap, I'm also going to let them know that they can book a call with me directly on my website by going to angietrueblood.com/services. There is a scheduler right there. And so to make sure that I'm capitalizing on that exposure, I can drip kind of plant seeds, like what we talked about in the episode with Nikki Rausch. We can plant seeds of working one-on-one with people throughout the podcast episodes. And then the call to action can also include going to my website and booking a call with me directly. So that I feel like is going to really cover me maxing out my one-to-one services and creating a wait list type of scenario. In terms of the Go Pitch Yourself program, the goal is, again, to pitch myself for podcasts. We're starting at 2 a week and making sure that my clear call to action is signing up for my email. So getting that roadmap and then joining the group if they're interested. It's something I can always feel out in the moment of the podcast. I never want to share too many call to actions with the audience. So, since I know that my email list is optimized to drive people to my group and vice versa, I can always jump back and forth on different podcasts. And maybe one time I encourage folks to join my group. Maybe another time I encourage them to join my email list. So, the beauty of having all of your digital assets optimized towards one another is that as long as you send them to one specific place and they go there, then they'll have access to all of the others. And then finally, I'm going to continue to record. Well, I will start actually batching my podcast recordings. So, in an effort to pressure test whether or not I could actually handle releasing an episode every week, I'm going to start batch recording solo episodes and interview episodes so that I can get a couple of months ahead. And when I feel like I'm a couple of months ahead, then I can go ahead and start releasing weekly. So, that is the plan for the podcast. Deep breath. All right. What do you think? I would love to hear your feedback on this episode. Is this helpful? I'm really hoping it allows you guys to look at what your business goals are for the next year and then align your visibility goals and actions with those goals. So, I would love to know what those goals that you have are for next year and if you have been able to create a visibility plan to support them. Now, I know usually I encourage you guys to share in Instagram stories, hashtag go pitch yourself, basically screaming to the world that you are ready to go pitch yourself and obviously do that. But I also really want to see what your visibility goals are for 2020, and I want to help hold you accountable. So, share a screenshot if you're up for it of this episode, include what your 2020 visibility goal is, and then tag me. And then, of course, I will reshare it so that I can help you spread the word about your visibility goals. And you never know, someone might be watching my stories that's interested in having you on their show as a guest expert. All right. And if by chance you are looking for more guidance and support in executing some of those visibility goals, the doors for the program Go Pitch Yourself will be reopening, like I mentioned, again in early January. And it's going to be the last chance to enroll at that founding members rate. And it's actually going to be the last chance to enroll until come April, to be quite honest. So if you want to be kept in the loop on that, all you need to do is hop on over to my site and grab that roadmap for podcast pitching success that actually shares the framework for the program. So the key pieces that we are tackling inside of Go Pitch Yourself are actually the 6 steps of the roadmap. And then you'll be the first also to be notified when the doors open again. So go grab that, AngieTrueBlood.com/roadmap. Okay, I know that was a lot. And that is all for this week, friends. And now I want you to go figure out your visibility goals and then get out there and go pitch yourself. Have a great rest of the week. We'll chat soon. Alrighty, pitches. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Now it's time for you to get out there and go pitch yourself. Want a team of cheerleaders rooting you on while you do? Then pop on over and join our free Facebook community, Go Pitch Yourself. It's full of entrepreneurs just like you who are stepping up, being seen, and supporting each other along the way. Don't forget to head on over to the website for show notes, downloads, and links to any resources we mentioned in this episode. The website is AngieTrueBlood.com/podcast. Happy pitching!